The divorce papers were sitting on the marble kitchen table when Elena Hartwell walked downstairs at 6 in the morning, and for a long moment she just stared at them. The neat white envelope, the silver pen placed beside it like a gift, like an invitation to finally end the slow death of everything she had once believed in. She didn't pick them up right away. Instead, she walked to the coffee machine, filled it with water and fresh grounds, pressed the button, and stood with her back to the table while the machine hissed and gurgled. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, Manhattan was waking up in shades of grey and pale gold. She watched a pigeon land on the ledge, look around with its jerky, indifferent head, and fly away again. At least something can leave easily, she thought. When the coffee was done, she poured herself a cup, black, the way she'd drunk it for the last 4 years, ever since the warmth and sweetness of her earlier life had started feeling dishonest somehow. She turned around. She looked at the envelope again. Marcus Hartwell was written on the outside in her own handwriting, neat and controlled the way her mother had taught her to write, the way she had tried to control everything in this marriage. With precision, with care, with a desperate, exhausting hope that if she was careful enough, nothing else would break. She sat down at the table. She did not open the envelope. She already knew what was inside. She had read it 4 times in her home office last night, sitting on the floor with the lamp casting a yellow circle around her, the rest of the house dark and silent as a held breath. She had read every clause, every line, the division of assets, the terms of the separation. There were no children to divide. That had been its own grief, its own years-long wound, but tonight she had been almost grateful for the simplicity of it. No children. Just a marriage. Just 12 years of a life she had built around a man who had, somewhere along the way, become a stranger wearing a familiar face. She heard him before she saw him, the quiet sound of his footsteps on the stairs, the particular rhythm she had memorized without meaning to, the way his left foot landed just slightly heavier than his right ever since the skiing accident in Aspen 6 winters ago. She had held his hand in the hospital that night. She had cried in the parking garage so he wouldn't see her cry. Marcus Hartwell walked into the kitchen at 6:14 in the morning wearing grey sweatpants and no shirt, his dark hair slightly disheveled from sleep, his jaw shadowed with 2 days of stubble. He was 41 years old and he was, in the purely physical sense, still one of the most striking men Elena had ever seen, broad-shouldered, lean, with dark eyes that had once looked at her like she was the most important thing he'd ever found. He stopped when he saw the envelope. He looked at it for exactly 3 seconds. She counted. Then he looked at her. Elena. His voice was quiet. Not surprised. Not outraged. Just quiet. "Good morning," she said. He walked to the coffee machine, poured himself a cup, and sat down across from her. The envelope sat between them on the marble table like a stone dropped into still water, sending out ripples neither of them acknowledged. "You want to talk about this?" he asked. "I think the document does the talking," she said. "I had Miriam draft it. Everything is fair. More than fair, actually. I'm not asking for the apartment. I'm not asking for the shares. I just want..." She stopped. She wrapped both hands around her mug. "I just want to stop pretending." Marcus looked down at his coffee. "Pretending," he repeated, and something moved across his face, too fast, too complicated, and was gone. "That we're okay," Elena said. "That this is a marriage. That we're..." Her voice tried to crack and she wouldn't let it. She had cried enough in 12 years. She had cried rivers, oceans, she had cried in bathrooms and parking garages and once in the back of a taxi while he sat right beside her, looking out the other window, and neither of them said a word. "We haven't been husband and wife in 4 years, Marcus. We've been roommates. Business associates. 2 people performing a life for other people's benefit. That's not..." "Don't." Her voice was sharp and she didn't apologize for it. "Don't tell me that's not true. Don't give me a version of this that lets you feel better about what's happened between us. I deserve the truth. After 12 years, I deserve at least that." He was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the city was getting louder, the hum of traffic rising, the distant sound of a siren somewhere far below. "You're right," he said finally. She blinked. In 12 years of arguments, real ones, the kind that happen when 2 people have stopped being careful with each other, Marcus Hartwell had never, not once, simply said "you're right" without adding a "but," a "however," a "let me explain." "You're right," he said again, softer. "We haven't been okay. And I know that's..." He stopped. He set down his mug. He pressed the heel of his hand against his forehead in a gesture so achingly familiar she had to look away. "I know that's my fault." "It's both of our faults," she said, because even now, even here, she couldn't bring herself to be entirely unfair. "No." His voice was strange. "No, Elena. It's mine." She looked at him. There was something in his face she hadn't seen in years, something raw, something that looked almost like pain, and she had learned long ago not to trust the moments when Marcus looked like he was in pain, because those were always the moments he was hiding the most. "I'm not doing this," she said quietly. She stood up. She pushed the envelope across the marble toward him. "I'm not getting drawn into another conversation where we talk around the real thing for 3 hours and end up exactly where we started. Sign the papers, Marcus. Please. Just sign them and let us both move on." She walked out of the kitchen. She did not look back. She did not see the way his hands moved to the envelope, lifted it, held it, and then set it back down on the marble without opening it, his jaw tight, his dark eyes fixed on the doorway through which she had disappeared, wearing an expression that was not grief exactly, and not anger, and not the cold blankness she had grown so accustomed to, but something else entirely. Something that looked, in the strange grey morning light, almost like desperation. Elena had met Marcus Hartwell on a Tuesday in October, 12 years and 4 months ago, at a charity gala she had attended as the plus one of her then-colleague Priya, who had been dating a hedge fund manager and needed moral support for the evening. Elena had been 27 years old. She had been wearing a borrowed dress, a midnight blue silk thing that belonged to her roommate, altered hastily with safety pins along the back because they were not the same size and there had been no budget for a new gown. She had been working as a junior archivist at the Kellerman Foundation, a mid-sized cultural nonprofit, earning a salary that was technically enough to live on in New York if you were extremely creative about what living meant. She had not expected to meet anyone that night. She had certainly not expected to meet Marcus Hartwell, who was at that time 31 years old, already the CEO of Hartwell Industries, already one of those names that got mentioned in the kind of business publications she skimmed in waiting rooms. She had known who he was in the vague way she knew who lots of powerful people were, as a fact, not a reality, the way you know that mountains exist without expecting to suddenly find yourself standing at the base of one. He had found her in the corner, reading the plaques on the silent auction items with genuine interest, because there was a small watercolor by a 19th-century female painter that she recognized from her archival work and was quietly delighted to see here, in this context, being undervalued by everyone in the room. "You actually know what you're looking at," he had said, coming to stand beside her, not introducing himself, just making an observation. She had looked up at him, this tall, dark-eyed man in a perfectly fitted suit, and said, without thinking, "Which is more than I can say for the person who priced it." He had laughed. A real laugh. Not the polished social laugh she heard everywhere in this kind of room, but something genuine, something surprised out of him. They had talked for 3 hours. She had gone home in the borrowed dress with her heart beating in a completely unprecedented way, sitting in the subway car at midnight, unable to stop smiling. He had called the next morning. She never found out, until much later, that he'd had to ask 5 different people to track down her number. The first 3 years had been extraordinary. She knew how that sounded, like the setup to a tragedy, like the before portion of a before and after, but it was simply true. She had been happy in a way that surprised her, that felt almost implausible, as though the universe had made some kind of accounting error in her favor and she was waiting for the correction. Marcus was brilliant, and not in the intimidating, armored way she had expected rich powerful men to be brilliant. He was genuinely curious. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He read the books she recommended and argued with her about them over dinner, animated and engaged, and those arguments were the kind she looked forward to, the kind that left her feeling more like herself rather than less. He was also private. She had understood that from the beginning, had even found it intriguing at first, the sense that there were rooms in him she hadn't yet been invited into, depths she was still discovering. She had not, at 27 and then 28 and then 29, understood that some rooms stay locked forever. That what she was reading as mystery was sometimes simply absence. They had married in the 4th year, on a Saturday in June at a small ceremony in the Catskills. Her idea, the small ceremony, and he had agreed to it so readily that she had loved him more for it, not knowing until later that he had agreed because a small ceremony meant fewer people asking questions he didn't want to answer. She had not known, at that wedding, about the first secret. She had not known about his family. What she knew, what she had been told, was simple. His parents were deceased. He had no siblings. He had grown up in Chicago, attended boarding school, then Yale, built his company from a seed investment at 24. It was a clean story. A self-made man story. The kind that American mythology loves. She had believed it completely. Why wouldn't she? He told it quietly, without drama, without the performance of a person who has practiced a lie. He told it the way you tell the true things, briefly, as though the details aren't particularly important because they simply are. She found out about the first secret in year 6. It had been an accident. She had been looking for an insurance document in his home office, his real home office, in their first home together, a brownstone in Brooklyn they had lived in before the penthouse, and she had opened the wrong drawer, and inside that drawer, beneath a folder of old financial statements, she had found a photograph. An old photograph, creased at one corner, the colors slightly faded in the way photographs from the late 1980s fade. A family photograph. A woman who was unmistakably Marcus in female form, same jaw, same dark eyes, same set of the shoulders, standing in a backyard with 2 children. A boy of perhaps 7 or 8, dark-haired, serious-faced. And a younger girl, maybe 4 or 5, laughing at something off camera. On the back of the photograph, in someone else's handwriting, Marcus and Sophie. Summer 1991. She had stood in the Home Office for a very long time, holding that photograph. Marcus was alive in 1991. He was 11 years old. Which meant the woman in the photograph was almost certainly his mother, who was supposedly dead. Who had been dead, he had told her, since he was 9 years old. A car accident. And who was Sophie? She had confronted him that night. She had laid the photograph on the kitchen table between them. They had a thing, she realized years later, about revelations on kitchen tables, and she had said very quietly, "Tell me the truth." And he had. Some of it. His mother was not dead. She was alive, estranged, living somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. They had not spoken in over a decade. The estrangement was his choice, he said, and he said it in a voice that closed like a door, and she had understood, or thought she had understood, that there was pain there, genuine pain, the kind that made people rewrite their own histories into cleaner narratives. She had understood. She had been compassionate. She had held his hand across the table and told him she wasn't angry, only that she needed him to be honest with her, that she could handle whatever the truth was, that she just couldn't handle building a life on things that weren't real. He had nodded. He had said he understood. He had said he would be more open. He had not told her about Sophie. She had not asked again. She had noticed the photograph only showed 2 names, Marcus and Sophie, and she had wondered, briefly, if Sophie was a cousin, a neighbor's child, someone incidental. She had told herself she was being paranoid. She had filed the question away in a part of herself she tried not to visit too often. Year 8. She found the bank statements. Not by accident that time. By then she could admit it now, to herself if no one else, she was looking. Quietly, carefully, not because she suspected infidelity, but because she had learned by then that Marcus had a habit of managing information, of giving her the picture without the frame, and she had started to need to understand the whole shape of the thing. The bank statements showed regular transfers. Monthly. Substantial, not enormous by Hartwell industry standards, but significant. To an account she didn't recognize. To a name she didn't recognize. S. Hartwell. She had sat with that for 3 weeks before she asked, "Is Sophie your sister?" She asked it on a Sunday morning, sitting across from him at the breakfast table in the penthouse they had moved into the year before, a table that was not marble then, just glass, before the renovation, and she watched his face in the moment between the question and the answer with the focused attention of someone who has learned to read a person's silences as carefully as their words. His face did a complicated thing. "Yes," he said. "She's alive." "Yes. You have a sister who is alive. And you've been sending her money every month, and you've never..." Elena stopped. She breathed. "Marcus. It's complicated. Everything with you is complicated." She heard the edge in her own voice, the exhaustion behind it. "Everything is complicated and sensitive and painful, and that's why we can't talk about it, and I'm tired of that. I'm so tired." "I know." "Do you?" "Because it has been 8 years. 8 years of me loving you and building a life with you and trying to be your partner, and you have a sister I didn't know existed. I was protecting her." "From what?" "From me." He was quiet. "From what, Marcus?" "From my father," he said. And his voice was so different when he said it, stripped of everything, just 3 words sitting there in the air between them, that she stopped. She waited. He told her, then, about his father. Some of it. Not all of it. She knew that now, of course, knew it the way you only know something once you have the full picture to compare the pieces to. But at the time, what he told her felt enormous, felt like the key to everything, felt like finally. His father, Richard Hartwell, was not dead either. His father was alive, and wealthy, and controlled a business empire that made Marcus's own considerable company look modest by comparison. His father was, the word Marcus used was dangerous, and he said it the same way he had said complicated, with that careful flatness that meant he was locking the rest of the feeling behind a door she couldn't open. Richard Hartwell did not know about Sophie. Sophie was not Richard Hartwell's daughter. Sophie was a child of Marcus's mother and a man she had loved before Richard. A man Richard had systematically destroyed when he found out about the affair, leaving him unemployable, destitute, eventually dead by his own hand. Sophie had been born after the man's death. Richard had never known. Marcus had known. Had always known. had protected his little sister from his father's knowledge for her entire life, had paid for her education, her apartment, her stability, had kept her name changed, her location private, had built walls around her the way other people build walls around the things they cannot afford to lose. Elena had cried that night. She had held him while he did not cry, because Marcus rarely cried, and when he did she was never supposed to see it, and she had thought, now I understand. And she had felt the marriage shift back towards solid ground beneath her feet. She had been wrong. She understood more, that was true. But not everything. Not nearly everything. Because there was still the third secret. The one she didn't find until 3 months ago. The one that had made her pick up the phone and call the family attorney before she had finished reading the document in her hands. The one that was still sitting, untouched, at the center of who Marcus Hartwell really was, and who, Elena had begun to suspect with a dread that kept her awake at 3 in the morning, she herself might really be. She spent the rest of that morning in her office. She answered emails. She had a call with a client in Edinburgh about a collection of 18th-century botanical illustrations. She ate half a slice of toast standing at the window. She did not think about Marcus. She was very careful not to think about Marcus. At 12:30, her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Not Marcus. Priya, the same Priya who had brought her to the gala 12 years ago, her closest friend, the godmother of the baby she had lost in year 7, the woman who had sat with her on the bathroom floor after that and not said a single useless word. She answered. He told my cousin that you've been sleeping in the guest room, Priya said, without preamble. Elena closed her eyes. Of course he did. He also said you seem, and I'm quoting Sanjay here, like someone who has made a decision. Sanjay is surprisingly perceptive for someone who once wore a fedora unironically for an entire year. Elena. I filed for divorce, Elena said. The papers are on the kitchen table. Priya was quiet for a moment. Then, okay. Are you okay? I will be. Are you right now? Elena looked at the photograph on her desk, the one she had put there 6 months ago, after she had taken down the one of her and Marcus at their wedding, quietly, without ceremony, the way you retire a flag. It was a photo of herself at 30, standing in front of the Kellerman Foundation, squinting into the summer sun, smiling for no particular reason except that she was happy that day. She looked at that woman. She tried to remember what she had been thinking. I'm scared, she admitted. Not of being alone. Not of starting over. I'm scared because I still don't know the full truth, and I'm scared that if I stay long enough to find out, I'll lose the ability to leave. Priya was quiet again. Outside, a cloud moved over the sun and the room dimmed slightly. What is the thing you found? Priya asked. The thing 3 months ago. You never told me what it was. No, Elena said. I didn't. Can you tell me now? Elena turned away from the photograph. She pressed her back against the window frame, the glass cold through her sweater. Do you know the name Caldwell? She said. Richard Caldwell. He was in the news, maybe 15 years ago. There was a lawsuit, a corporate takeover. He lost everything. Priya thought. Vaguely. Wasn't he in shipping? Old money. Old money. Exactly. Elena's voice was steady, and she was proud of how steady it was. He had a daughter. He had a daughter named Elena. Silence. Elena, Priya said slowly. Yes. Your name is Elena. My name, Elena said carefully, is the name my parents gave me. My parents, who I have always believed were David and Miriam Voss, a high school music teacher and a librarian from New Jersey, who I loved very much, who are both now deceased, and who I have never had any reason to doubt. Elena, Priya said. What are you saying? I'm saying, Elena said, that I found a document in Marcus's safe. A document that was not meant for me. A document that contained, among other things, a private investigator's report from 14 years ago. She stopped. She breathed. Commissioned by Marcus. About a woman named Elena Caldwell, daughter of Richard Caldwell, who was placed into private adoption at birth and raised under the name Elena Voss. The silence stretched. Oh my God, Priya whispered. Yes. You think. I don't know what I think. I know what the document suggests. I know that Marcus had that document before we met. I know he knew who I was, or who I might be, before the gala, before the corner, before the watercolor and the 3 hours of conversation and the phone call the next morning. Elena's voice was still steady. She was enormously, terrifyingly calm. I know that the man I married has known something about my identity that I have never known. And I know that whatever that something is, it is connected to his father, and to Sophie, and to the entire hidden architecture of a life he has never fully let me see. Silence. This one longer. That's why you filed, Priya said. That's why I filed. But you don't know for certain. No. I don't know for certain. And that's the thing, Priya. That's exactly the thing. I have been in this marriage for 12 years and I still don't know what is certain and what isn't. I still don't know which parts of my life are real. Her voice, finally, cracked. Just slightly. Just at the edge. I'm so tired of not knowing what's real. Priya said nothing, because she was wise enough to know there was nothing to say, and the silence was kind rather than empty. Sign the papers, Priya said gently. Make him sign the papers. And then, whatever the truth is, you find it. For yourself. Not for him. For you. Yes, Elena said. After she hung up, she stood very still for a moment. Then she walked back to her desk and opened her laptop. She typed, Richard Caldwell, Caldwell Shipping, daughter, adoption. She stared at the search results. And then, before she could read a single one, her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. 3 words. Don't leave yet. She read the text twice. She looked at the search results. She looked at the text again. Her heart was doing something complicated in her chest. She thought of the photograph in the kitchen drawer, the one she had found 6 years ago, the woman with Marcus's face, the children in the backyard. Marcus and Sophie. Summer 1991. She thought of the bank transfers. She thought of the document in the safe, the PI report, the name Elena Caldwell in black ink on white paper. She thought of Marcus at 6 in the morning, sitting across the marble table, saying you're right in that strange, stripped voice. She thought of the 3 seconds he had looked at the envelope before he looked at her. She thought of 12 years. She did not respond to the text. But she did not close the laptop. She sat there in the pale afternoon light, in the quiet of the office, with the search results open in front of her and the questions that had built for 3 months pressing against the inside of her chest like something trying to get out. And she thought, one way or another, it ends here. One way or another, today is the day the truth comes into the light. She just didn't know yet what the truth was going to cost her. She didn't know that the search result she was staring at contained a name she recognized, not from research, not from documents, but from a gravestone she had stood in front of at the age of 9, on a cold March morning, holding her adoptive mother's hand, being told that this was a distant relative, that it was important to pay respects, not understanding any of it, only remembering the name carved in granite and the strange feeling in her chest, the feeling that something about standing there was more significant than she was being told. She didn't know that. Marcus was sitting downstairs, in the kitchen, with the unsigned divorce papers in front of him and his phone in his hand, not texting anyone, just staring at the wall, going through the same calculation he had been going through for 14 years. The one where every path he could take led somewhere he had been trying to protect her from, and the question was no longer whether she would find out, but whether she would ever forgive him for the shape of how she found it. And she didn't know that 40 minutes from now, the doorbell was going to ring. And the person standing on the other side of the door was not going to be a delivery driver, or Priya, or anyone connected to the divorce papers on the kitchen table. It was going to be a woman in her mid-50s with dark eyes shaped exactly like Marcus's, wearing a grey coat and no jewelry, carrying a single envelope. A woman who had not spoken to her son in 11 years. A woman who had, apparently, decided that today was also the day the truth came into the light. The doorbell rang at 2:47 in the afternoon. Elena heard it from her office, a low, melodic chime that had always seemed too gentle for the scale of the penthouse, the kind of sound that belonged on a cottage door somewhere, not on 40 floors above Manhattan. She heard it, and she assumed it was a delivery, and she did not move from her desk. The second ring came 30 seconds later. She frowned. Deliveries went through the building concierge. No one rang the penthouse bell directly without being announced first. She reached for her phone to call down to the desk and ask who had come up, and as she was reaching, she heard Marcus's footsteps in the hallway below, the familiar weight and rhythm of them, and then the soft sound of the front door opening. Then silence. The kind of silence that is not actually empty. The kind that has weight and temperature. Elena stood up from her desk. She told herself she was not going to go downstairs. She told herself that whatever was happening at the front door was Marcus's business, not hers. She had filed for divorce that morning, she had drawn the line, she was not going to begin immediately blurring it by inserting herself into his life. She walked to the top of the stairs anyway. She couldn't see the front door from where she stood. The angle was wrong, the hallway curved, but she could hear. And what she heard was this, a woman's voice, low and even, saying his name. Not Marcus. The other name. The name she had heard him use exactly once, in a conversation with his college roommate at their 5th anniversary party, the name he had gone by as a boy, before he had reinvented himself entirely. Cole, the woman said. We need to talk. Elena's hand went to the banister. She heard Marcus, Cole, make a sound that was not quite a word. Something that was half greeting and half something older. Something that had nothing to do with the man she had been married to for 12 years and everything to do with the boy in the photograph, the 7-year-old with the serious face, standing in a backyard in 1991. "I know," he said. "I know. Come in." The door closed. Elena stood at the top of the stairs for a long moment. Her heart was beating in a slow, deliberate way that felt like her body preparing for something. She thought about going back to her office. She thought about the search results still open on her laptop, the name she hadn't let herself fully process yet, the text, "Don't leave yet," still unanswered on her phone. She thought, the woman with Marcus's eyes. The woman from the photograph. She walked down the stairs. She saw them in the sitting room off the main hallway, Marcus standing near the window, and a woman seated on the edge of the sofa in a grey coat she hadn't removed, as though she might need to leave quickly, as though she were not yet sure she was allowed to stay. The woman was perhaps 55, perhaps 60, with dark hair threaded through with silver and a face that was handsome rather than beautiful, strong-boned, weathered in a way that suggested not age exactly but experience, the particular carving that life does when it has been difficult. Her eyes were the same shape as Marcus's eyes. The same darkness. The same way of holding still and observing everything at once. She looked up when Elena appeared in the doorway, and something moved across her face, recognition, or something that felt like recognition, the double take of seeing someone familiar in an unfamiliar context. Marcus turned. The look on his face was not anger. It was not surprise. It was the look of a man watching two things he has kept carefully separate move toward each other and knowing there is nothing left to do but stand very still and let it happen. "Elena," he said. "I heard the bell," she said. Her voice was calm. She was grateful for how calm her voice was. "I heard voices." "You should." He stopped. He passed one hand over his jaw. "You should probably come in." She came into the room. She looked at the woman on the sofa. The woman looked back at her with those dark, still eyes, and then she said, "You're Elena." "Yes." "I'm Catherine." A pause. "Marcus's mother." Elena sat down in the armchair across from her. She did not look at Marcus. She felt him in the room the way you feel weather, a pressure, a change in the quality of the air, but she kept her eyes on Catherine Hartwell, or whoever she was now, whatever name she went by in the Pacific Northwest, and she said, "I know who you are. I saw your photograph. 6 years ago." Something shifted in Catherine's expression. She looked at Marcus. "She knows more than you think," Marcus said quietly. He had not moved from the window. "She found some things." "How much?" Catherine asked. "I don't know exactly." "I found the PI report," Elena said. Both of them went very still. The PI report, Elena had learned in the 3 months since she'd found it, was apparently the thing that was not supposed to be found. She could tell by the quality of the stillness that settled over the room, not guilt exactly, but the particular tension of people who have constructed something carefully and are watching it be touched by someone who doesn't know how fragile it is. "The one about Elena Caldwell," she said. Catherine made a small sound. "Not quite a word. Not quite a name." "That report was in my safe," Marcus said. His voice had gone very controlled. "How?" "You gave me the combination 3 years ago," Elena said. "You said I should always know where the important documents were. In case something happened to you." She paused. "I believed you meant it as trust." He closed his eyes briefly. "I found it by accident," she said. "I was looking for our tax documents. The report was in a folder I didn't recognize and I opened it before I understood what it was." She turned back to Catherine. "I want to know what Elena Caldwell is to your family. I want to know why my husband had a private investigator's report about her, about me, maybe, before we ever met. I want to know why the name Caldwell keeps connecting to everything I don't understand about this marriage." She paused. "And I want the truth. Not the version of the truth that's been carefully managed to protect everyone else in this room. The actual truth." Catherine looked at her for a long moment. Then she reached into the inner pocket of her grey coat and removed an envelope. Not the divorce papers. That envelope was still on the kitchen table where Elena had left it that morning. This was a different envelope, smaller, older, the paper slightly yellowed at the edges. She held it in her hands for a moment, looking down at it, and her expression was the expression of someone about to open a door they have kept shut for a very long time, bracing for what the air on the other side will feel like. "I came here today," Catherine said, "because my son has spent 14 years trying to solve a problem that cannot be solved by protecting people from the truth of it. And I watched him marry you, which I did not expect." She glanced at Marcus, something complicated in that glance. "And I watched him love you, which I also did not expect, and I watched him be unable to tell you the things you needed to know, and I watched this marriage," she stopped, looked down at the envelope, "become what? It became. Because of silence. Because of the thing we Hartwell men and women do, which is love people and then build walls around them and call it protection. The room was very quiet. I'm going to tell you something, Catherine said. And Marcus is going to hate some of it. And some of it he already knows and has been unable to say. And some of it, her voice, steady until now, wavered for just a moment, some of it is something neither of you knows yet. Mom, Marcus said. His voice was strained. Wait. No, Catherine said. She looked at him, and the look was not unkind but it was final, the look of someone who has waited long enough. No more waiting, Cole. I came here because she filed for divorce and because if she leaves without knowing, if she spends the rest of her life not knowing, then I am as responsible for that as you are, and I will not be. She turned back to Elena. Richard Caldwell was my brother. Elena heard the words. She processed them. She felt the room, the particular shape of the room she had been living in for 12 years, begin very slowly to rearrange itself around her. Your brother, she said. My younger brother. Richard and I were not close by the time I married Marcus's father. Richard had his world and I had mine and there were choices made by both of us but that's not the point. Catherine opened the envelope. She removed a single folded piece of paper, but she did not unfold it yet. She held it. Richard had a daughter. Late in his life, from a relationship that wasn't his marriage. A relationship he kept secret because he was in the middle of a business crisis and a personal scandal, and a daughter born outside his marriage would have complicated things he couldn't afford to complicate. Elena's hands were very still in her lap. The daughter was given up for adoption, Catherine continued. Private. Discreet. Richard's choice. The mother was paid well to disappear, and she did, and the child was placed with a family that had been vetted and compensated and sworn to a specific kind of silence. She paused. A family named Voss. In New Jersey. The silence in the room was so complete that Elena could hear traffic from 40 floors below, the muted, continuous sound of the city, indifferent and ongoing. My parents, Elena said. The people who raised you, Catherine said, gently but precisely, yes. Elena turned to look at Marcus. He was not looking at her. He was looking at the floor, and his jaw was tight, and his hands were loose at his sides, and he had the appearance of a man who has rehearsed this moment many times in his imagination and has discovered that the imagination is always inadequate. You knew, she said. Not when we met, he said. I knew about Elena Caldwell. I knew she existed. I'd found out about the adoption when I was trying to understand my father's finances, years before I met you. Richard Caldwell was my uncle by blood even though I'd never met him, and I was piecing together the family history, trying to understand what my father knew, what leverage he might have over people. He stopped. He looked at her. I didn't know it was you. Not until the third date. The third date, she repeated. You mentioned New Jersey. You mentioned your parents' names. You mentioned, he stopped, you mentioned your birthday. And I went home that night and I sat with the PI report and the date matched and the names matched and I. You knew on the third date, Elena said, that I might be your mother's niece. The word sat in the air between them. Niece. The shape it made in the room. The thing it did to 12 years. Might be, he said. I didn't know for certain. There was no DNA, no. But you suspected. Yes. And you kept seeing me. He said nothing. For 12 years, Elena said. You kept seeing me, and dating me, and marrying me, knowing that I might be. It's not, he took a step toward her, then stopped. Elena. It's not what it sounds like. I know how it sounds. I know. But it's not. He pressed his hand over his mouth for a moment, collecting himself. Richard Caldwell was not my uncle the way family means family. He was a name in documents. He was a biological connection to a branch of a family I had no relationship with. He was my father, Elena said. The words landed. Marcus closed his eyes. Biologically, he said. Yes. Biologically. So when you married me. I married you, he said, and his voice was raw now, fully raw, nothing left to hide behind, because I loved you. Because in 3 hours at a gallery I had never felt that way about anyone in my life and I tried very hard not to feel it for a long time and I could not stop. And the biological thing, I told myself it was a technicality, a genealogical coincidence. That it didn't mean anything in the real, lived sense of family because neither of us had ever. It wasn't your decision to make, Elena said. Her voice was still steady. She did not understand how her voice was still steady. Whether it meant something. Whether I should know. That was not your decision. No, he said. It wasn't. I know that. So why, she asked, didn't you tell me? He looked at her for a long time. Because, he said, if I told you, I thought you'd leave. The simplicity of it. 12 years, one sentence. And I would rather, he said, very quietly, have you in my life under terms that weren't perfect than not have you in it at all. That was wrong. I know it was wrong. I knew it was wrong when I was doing it. I told myself every year that I would find the right moment, and there was never a right moment, and then the wrong moments accumulated into years and the years became the marriage we have now, Elena finished. Yes. Catherine had been very still during all of this, the unfolded paper in her hands, watching them with those dark, careful eyes. Now she said, quietly, there's more. Both Elena and Marcus looked at her. The reason I came today, Catherine said. It isn't only about the adoption. The adoption is, that's the thing that needed to be said, yes, but it is not the thing that made me get on a plane. She held up the paper. Richard Caldwell died 3 weeks ago. A beat. He's been ill for a long time, she said. He had no other children. No legitimate heirs. His estate, she glanced at the paper, his estate is considerable, even after the losses he suffered in the lawsuits. The shipping company was rebuilt, partially, over the last decade. There are assets, properties, a trust. She looked at Elena. He knew about you. He knew where you were. He chose, for reasons that were probably complicated and certainly inadequate, not to make contact. But he did not cut you out. Elena stared at her. His will, Catherine said, names Elena Voss, born Elena Caldwell, as his sole heir. The room was absolutely still. His estate is approximately $340 million, Catherine said. Elena heard the number. It went somewhere outside of her immediate comprehension, somewhere where very large things go when the mind is already handling as much as it can manage. He's been trying to contact you through his lawyers for 3 weeks.